Goodnight, and sweet dreams. That was what Freddie Mercury said at the end of the concert at Knebworth Park on the 9th of August, 1986. 6 words. The same 6 words he said at the end of every Magic Tour concert, the specific closing formula he had used across the entirety of that summer's touring. The ritual phrase that followed the crown and the gown and the final encore, and the specific theatrical gesture of the goodbye. He had said it in Frankfurt. He had said it in Stockholm. He had said it in Cologne and Manchester and Budapest. He said it at Knebworth. And then he walked off the stage, and the crew began to strike the set, and the 120,000 people walked back to their cars and their trains and their coaches and their beds, knowing they had seen something extraordinary and not knowing not one of them that Goodnight and Sweet Dreams was not the formula for that evening's goodbye. It was the last goodbye. Freddie Mercury never said those words on a stage again. He never stood at the front of a stage again. He walked off the Knebworth stage and the Magic Tour was over, and Queen as a performing entity was over, and the specific relationship between Freddie Mercury's voice and a live audience, the relationship he had been building and refining since Truro City Hall in 1970 was over. Nobody in that field knew it. Not the audience, not the band. Almost certainly not Freddie Mercury himself, standing in the crown and the gown in the August dark, saying goodnight. Goodnight and sweet dreams is not a line from a Queen song. It is not a famous quote. Before the 9th of August, 1986, it was a concert closing formula, the specific verbal gesture that ended the Magic Tour shows, placed after the crown and the gown, in the moment when the performer has given everything and is stepping back before the separation of the house lights. After the 9th of August, 1986, it became something else. It became the last public words Freddie Mercury ever said from a stage. The transformation from concert formula to final farewell happened without anyone present being aware of it in the retrospect of the years that followed. When people who had been at Knebworth began to understand what they had actually been watching, and began to hear the phrase differently, and began to understand that the 6 words had contained, without anyone knowing it, the most complete goodbye Freddie Mercury ever said. The Magic Tour of 1986 was, by every external measure, the best Queen had ever been. A Kind of Magic was #1. The venues were the largest Queen had ever played. Freddie Mercury was performing at the peak of the quality that had developed across 20 years of concerts, the instinctive relationship with an audience that Brian May has described as unlike anything else. The Magic Tour had a specific atmosphere, a quality of completion, of something at its most fully itself. Nobody identified this atmosphere as the atmosphere of an ending. It felt like the opposite of an ending, the fullest possible expression of what Queen had become. The ending came later, in the Knebworth night, in the 6 words, in the walking off. The Magic Tour was the best Queen had ever been. The staging, the production, the crowds, all of it at its peak. And Freddie Mercury had been saying goodnight and sweet dreams at the end of every show all summer. Frankfurt, Stockholm, Cologne, Budapest, Wembley twice, and then Knebworth. And the phrase he had been saying all summer, the same phrase, the same 6 words, was the last thing he ever said on a stage. He did not know. The crowd did not know. The phrase had been a formula. It became a testament. That is what retrospect does to the last thing. It makes it mean everything. The 9th of August, 1986 at Knebworth Park was a Saturday. The weather was warm. The crowd the largest Queen had ever played to in England, 120,000 people had arrived from across the country and from other countries, had filled the Knebworth Estates parkland in the specific way that large outdoor crowds fill large spaces. A sea of people, individually present and collectively enormous, stretching from the stage barrier to the farthest visible point. The production was vast, the largest Queen staging that the Magic Tour had assembled, designed for maximum scale and maximum impact. Freddie Mercury arrived by helicopter, the yellow leather jacket, the short dark hair, the full thick black mustache. He performed the set with the full commitment that every account of the Magic Tour confirms was characteristic of every Magic Tour show. He sang every song the way it needed to be sung. He led the crowd through the call and response. He did the vocal exercises. He wore the crown and the gown for the finale. And at the very end, in the dark of the August evening, in the theatrical space between the last encore and the return to private person, he said, "Good night and sweet dreams." A closing phrase at the end of a large concert is a transitional object. It marks a threshold between the performance world, where performer and audience have been in a state of mutual presence, and the ordinary world where the performer goes backstage and the audience goes home. Good night is a farewell. Sweet dreams is a gift, the offer of peace, of rest after the experience. Together, goodbye, and may what follows be good. For every Magic Tour audience that received this phrase across the summer of 1986, it had meant, the concert is over. You may go home. I hope you sleep well. At Knebworth, it meant something else. It meant goodbye. The real one. The one nobody knew they were receiving. The crown and the gown that Freddie Mercury wore for the final encore of every Magic Tour show illuminate the specific quality of the Knebworth goodbye. The costume, a simple golden crown, a velvet robe, the theatrical gesture of the king taking his leave was designed for this. The transformation of the concert's closing into something ceremonial. The crown and the gown said, "This is not simply the end of the show. This is a formal departure." Freddie Mercury wore it at every Magic Tour show. He wore it at Knebworth. And when he stood at the front of the Knebworth stage in the crown and the gown, looking out at 120,000 people in the August dark, the ceremony of the closing was present. The ritual of departure was present. He said the words. He walked off. The ceremony turned out to have been the real ceremony. The theatrical king leaving the theatrical court turned out to be the actual person, Freddie Mercury, 39 years old, wearing a gown in a park in Hertfordshire, leaving for the last time. The crown and the gown were a theatrical gesture. The closing phrase was a theatrical formula. And both of them, the gesture and the formula, turned out to be, at Knebworth, the real thing. The real crown, the real gown, the real goodbye. The theater became reality without anyone present understanding the transition. He walked off. The lights came up. The crowd went home. The theater was over. The reality was that it was over in a different and larger sense than anyone knew. The question of what Queen's surviving members knew on the night of Knebworth is one the historical record does not answer completely. The formal diagnosis came in October 1987, more than a year after Knebworth. But the signs were present in 1986. Brian May has described hearing Freddie say, the week before Knebworth, that he was not going to be doing this forever, that this was probably his last time. He heard it as the exhaustion of a long tour. It was not only that. And coming off the Knebworth stage, Freddie Mercury said, "I can't fucking do this anymore. My whole body's racked with pain." Brian May heard this too. The filter of 16 years of knowing Freddie Mercury absorbed it as more of the same. The filter was not wrong. It was simply not complete. After Knebworth, Freddie Mercury did not return to a stage. The diagnosis was confirmed in October 1987, 16 months later. In the year between, as Queen continued recording, as the miracle was made, the Knebworth night was not yet known to be what it was. It was simply the last show of a good tour. Knebworth would not acquire the weight it now carries until after the diagnosis became known, and even then the weight accumulated gradually across years as people who had been in that field began to understand that the show they had attended was the last one. Goodnight and Sweet Dreams, said at the end of a concert nobody knew was the last concert, acquired its weight in the same way, gradually, in retrospect. There is a specific thing that retrospect does to the last instance of something. It makes the last instance mean everything that the instances before it only partially meant. Every previous concert Freddie Mercury gave was a great concert. Knebworth was a great concert. The specific quality that makes Knebworth different from every other great concert he gave is not that it was better, it was not, in all likelihood, superior to other concerts in any purely musical sense. What makes it different is that it was the last, and the last carries the weight of every previous instance inside it, plus the additional weight of being final. The last goodbye contains every previous goodbye. The last goodnight contains every previous goodnight. When Freddie Mercury said goodnight and sweet dreams at Knebworth, He was not only saying goodbye to the 120,000 people in that field, he was saying goodbye though he did not know it, and they did not know it, to the 20 years of goodbyes that had preceded it, to every concert, to every crowd, to the specific thing between him and a live audience that had been the center of his life since Churro City Hall in 1970. Every concert he ever gave was in that sentence. The Churro City Hall crowd from 1970, Buenos Aires, Live Aid, the Earl's Court crowds, the Forum in Los Angeles, every person who had ever been in a room when Freddie Mercury was performing, all of them in the Knebworth field, in that moment, in those 6 words. He said goodnight and sweet dreams to all of them at once, to all the crowds he had ever had, and none of them knew it, and he may not have known it, and it happened anyway. The last goodbye contains every goodbye. That is what it is for. The 120,000 people who walked away from Knebworth carried something home they did not know they were carrying, the last Freddie Mercury concert, in the physical way that a live concert is carried in the body. Sound, presence, the quality of being in a large crowd doing the same thing simultaneously. They carried good night and sweet dreams without knowing what it meant. Some of them have spoken about what it was like to be in that field. The quality of those accounts is the quality of people who understand they were present at something unrepeatable and did not know it at the time. They thought they would go back. They thought there would be another tour. They thought good night and sweet dreams meant until next time. Brian May plays the Magic Tour footage at Queen Plus Adam Lambert concerts. He plays it on the screens behind the stage, the 1986 footage, the Yellow Jacket, the Wembley shows, the Knebworth footage, and he plays his guitar alongside the recording and has said across the years that it never becomes routine, that the Knebworth footage in particular carries a specific weight that does not diminish with repetition. He was there. He was on the stage. He heard the 6 words from the same distance. He heard every other night's 6 words. He did not know when he heard them what they were. He knows now. He has known for 35 years. And every time the screen shows Knebworth the crown, the gown, the words he is in 2 places at once, the stage of the present concert, playing the Red Special in whatever arena or stadium the current tour occupies, in the Knebworth Park field of the 9th of August, 1986, hearing the words that were the last words, not knowing yet that they were the last words, holding both of these simultaneously for the rest of his career. Brian May was on the stage when the words were said. He did not know what they meant. He knows now, and he has carried that knowing the gap between what he understood when he heard it and what he understood later for nearly 40 years. On every stage, every night, the screens show the footage. The words are said, good night and sweet dreams. Every audience hears it differently from the way the Knebworth audience heard it. Every audience knows what it turned out to mean. The Knebworth audience did not know. That is the whole of the difference between every other goodbye Freddie Mercury ever said and the last one. Good night and sweet dreams. 6 words. Said at Knebworth Park on the 9th of August, 1986, in the dark of the English August, in a crown and a gown, to 120,000 people who had come from everywhere to hear him and who were about to go home and sleep and wake up the next morning in the ordinary world that follows a great concert. He walked off the stage. The house lights came up. The crowd dispersed. The set was struck. The trucks were loaded. The Magic Tour was over. And the 6 words sat in the air of the Knebworth field and waited for the people who had heard them to understand, slowly over years, what they had actually contained. Good night. He was leaving for the night, and sweet dreams. He wished them well. And then he was gone, not that night, not immediately, but in the direction of gone, in the way that all last things are, present at the time, understood later. Nobody knew. They went home. They had sweet dreams probably, as you do after a great concert, and the words waited in them, in all of them, to become what they became. The last goodbye, said in a park, in August, in a crown,